Among the Old Stones. She reached the ruin alone. The journey here had required caution, shoulders held too tight, senses stretched thin. In human lands, Fae did not linger without consequence. Even now, so close to the mountains, that vigilance still lived. It took time for it to loosen. It always did. But as the trees thickened and the stone beneath her feet grew uneven and old, something shifted. The land felt different here, quieter, not empty, but held. Her breath slowed before she noticed it doing so, and the tension she carried eased by a fraction. The intention to come here had been set deliberately weeks ago, perhaps longer, but she had not known what she would find when she arrived, only that something inside her had been pulling in this direction, persistent and low. The ruin stood where the forest began to reclaim itself. Broken stone lay scattered without pattern, softened by moss and years of quiet. What had once been walls now suggested themselves only in half-arches and low rises of rock, tree roots threading through them as though they had always belonged there. There was no clear shape left to remember, no grand outline, no singular purpose that announced itself. It did not feel abandoned, it felt finished. She stepped carefully between fallen stones and found a place where the ground dipped slightly, sheltered by what might once have been an inner wall. There she sat, cool earth beneath her body, her hand found stone, cold, steady, patient, unchanging. The ruin did not speak, but as she sat there, time stilled, and something in her answered. She thought of her grandmother, the woman who had raised her after her mother was gone. The memory came softly without the sharpness of pain. Her grandmother's voice had always been like that, firm when it needed to be, gentle when gentleness required. And she had been the centre of her childhood, the constant shape around which everything else arranged itself. Even now, long after she had passed into the veil, the thought of her still carried weight. Her grandmother had lived here once, not as an elder, not back then. She had been young, hardly more than a child herself when these stones still held purpose. She used to tell stories of running through this place with scraped knees and laughter in her throat, of a life lived before humans pushed their reach this far south, before mines were carved into mountains and roads cut where trees once stood. And she had spoken, too, of her own mother, the one who came before, who would bring her to a sacred place nearby when the world felt too heavy, a temple not meant for worship or offering, but for release, a place built to hold sorrow so that people did not have to carry it alone. Her grandmother never spoke of that place as something lost, only as something that had done its work. Sitting here now, hand pressed against stone that remembered more than it revealed, she felt the echo of that understanding settle into her chest. She had not come only to remember the ruin. She had come to remember a woman, the woman who had been the star of her childhood, the steady presence that had made the world survivable when it first began to show its teeth. Though her grandmother had been gone for many years, the question she had carried since the loss had never truly left her. How do you live with this? The question had returned now, sharp and newly formed, because she had lost someone else, someone close, someone whose absence still felt unreal, like a misstep that time would surely correct if she waited long enough. But time had not corrected it. The ruin did not offer answers. It did not explain grief or soften it into something easier to bear. It did not tell her what to do next. It simply remained, stone and root and silence, holding the weight of all that had passed through it without collapsing under the strain. And in that, she understood something her grandmother had tried to teach her all along. Grief was not a failing. Grief was not something to be hurried through or hidden away. It was permission to remember, to feel, to acknowledge that something mattered enough to leave a wound behind. It was the cost of loving fully in a world that did not promise permanence. She shed a tear. then several more. The quiet held her simply, the stone old and patient beneath her hand. Time drifted around her, not moving forward so much as settling. Something small loosened, a stitch eased, a lightness granted, not as relief, but as allowance. She would not leave healed, but the ache inside her had shifted. It sat differently now, no longer pressing in on itself, no longer demanding to be solved. It had space to breathe. She rested her palm against the stone one last time, then turned and began to walk back through the trees. The land did not cling to her, it did not ask her to stay. It had given what it could, and that was enough. Behind her, the ruin remained. Wind threaded its way through broken arches, leaves stirred softly against ancient stone, roots continued their slow, patient work. The place went on doing what it had always done, holding what had been loved, lost, or broken.